The sleeping bag smelled like mildew and broken promises, but it was all I had against the bitter cold seeping through the cracked windows of my 2004 Honda Civic. I pulled it tighter around my shoulders, my breath forming small clouds in the frigid air as I shifted in the reclined driver's seat, trying to find a position that didn't make my hip bones ache against the worn upholstery. 3 months. 3 months of living in this car, parked in different spots each night to avoid the police who routinely swept parking lots for people like me, people who'd fallen through the cracks, people who'd become invisible to the world that rushed past them every day. My name is Maya Torres, and I'm 26 years old. 2 years ago, I had an apartment, a job as a veterinary assistant, and a future that looked reasonably bright. Then my mother got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'd drained my savings paying for treatments insurance wouldn't cover, taken out loans I couldn't afford, and eventually lost my job when I missed too many shifts staying by her side in the hospital. She died anyway. 6 months ago, on a Tuesday that had started with rain and ended with me alone in a funeral home I couldn't afford, signing papers for a cremation I'd have to make payments on for the next 2 years. After that, everything unraveled. Eviction, repossession of everything except this car, which was so old and worthless the bank didn't bother. A spiral of rejection letters from jobs that could see the homelessness in my unwashed hair and donated clothes. The steady erosion of dignity that came with washing up in gas station bathrooms and rationing dollar menu items to make them last. But I survived. Barely, desperately, but surviving. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Tonight, I'd parked in the far corner of a 24-hour grocery store lot, tucked between 2 panel vans that provided some cover from the security cameras. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning a stale bagel someone had thrown away outside a coffee shop, still wrapped in a napkin. I had $3.47 to my name, enough for a small coffee and maybe a banana if I was lucky. Tomorrow, I'd go to the day labor office again, stand in line with dozens of other desperate people, and hope someone would hire me for a few hours of work that paid cash under the table. The indignity of it all pressed down on me like a physical weight. I'd been a straight-A student. I'd graduated from community college with honors. I'd worked 2 jobs to support my mother while she was sick, barely sleeping, running on fumes and determination, and now I lived in my car, rationing toothpaste and wondering if I'd ever feel warm again. I was drifting into an uneasy sleep when the sound of screeching tires jolted me awake. My heart hammered as I cautiously peered over the dashboard, trying to see what was happening without being spotted. 2 black SUVs had pulled into the parking lot, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. They moved slowly, methodically, as if hunting for something, or someone. Instinct told me to duck down, to make myself invisible. I'd learned in these months on the streets that when violence was near, the safest thing was to disappear, to become part of the background, to survive by not being seen. I slid lower in my seat, my pulse racing as the SUVs circled the lot. Through the gap between my dashboard and the steering wheel, I watched as they paused near the grocery store entrance, then continued their sweep. That's when I saw him. A man stumbled from between 2 parked cars about 30 feet from where I sat, his movements unsteady and urgent. Even in the dim light from the distant street lamps, I could see he was injured. One hand pressed against his side, dark liquid seeping between his fingers. Blood. He wore an expensive suit, or what had been expensive before it had been torn and stained. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and even from this distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he moved like a wounded animal seeking shelter. The SUV's headlights swept toward his direction. He saw them too. His head snapped up, and I caught a glimpse of his face sharp features set in lines of pain and determination, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that even in his obviously desperate state held an unmistakable authority. He started moving faster, half running, half limping between the parked cars. But he was injured and losing blood. He wouldn't make it far. The SUVs were closing in, their engines growling like mechanical predators. Not my problem, I told myself firmly. Stay invisible. Stay safe. You can't help anyone when you can barely help yourself. But then he stumbled, nearly falling, catching himself on the hood of a car. His hand left a smear of blood on the paint. He was maybe 20 feet from my car now, and I could hear him breathing harsh, labored gasps that spoke of serious injury. The SUVs turned down my row. In that moment, our eyes met. His gaze locked onto mine through my windshield, intense, penetrating, desperate. Dark eyes the color of midnight, burning with intelligence and something else. A silent plea that bypassed every rational thought in my head and went straight to something deeper. He wasn't just asking for help. He was asking for his life. Not your problem, not your fight. You have nothing. You are nothing. You can't save anyone. But I'd watched my mother die slowly, painfully, while I stood helpless. I'd felt the crushing weight of being unable to protect the one person I loved most in the world. And in that moment, looking into this stranger's desperate eyes, some part of me that hadn't quite died yet made a choice. I unlocked the back door. It was the smallest sound, just a quiet click, but he heard it. His eyes widened fractionally in surprise, then understanding. He moved fast despite his injury, pulling open my back door and diving into the cramped space behind my front seats. Down, I hissed, my voice rough from disuse. Under the blankets. Don't move. Don't breathe loud. He didn't argue. Within seconds, he'd wedged himself onto the floor of my back seat, and I'd thrown my spare blankets and bags over him, creating what I hoped looked like the jumbled mess of someone living in their car rather than a hiding place for a bleeding man. The SUV's headlights swept over my car. My heart hammered so hard I was certain they could hear it. I forced myself to settle back into my reclined position, pulling my sleeping bag up to my chin, eyes closed, trying to look like just another homeless person trying to sleep. The SUVs slowed, stopped. Through my barely open eyelids, I watched as men emerged from both vehicles. 4 of them, all wearing dark clothes, all moving with the coordinated precision of people used to hunting. They were armed. I could see the bulge of weapons beneath their jackets. "You see where he went?" One of them called out, his accent thick Eastern European, maybe Russian. He was here. Can't have gone far. Not with that wound. They began moving between the cars, flashlights cutting through the darkness, getting closer to my car with every step. Under the blankets in my back seat, I heard the man's breathing shallow, controlled, but definitely there. Too loud. They would hear it. They would find him. And then what would they do to hide him? Terror flooded my system, icy and paralyzing. What had I done? Why had I opened that door? One of the men approached my car, his flashlight beam sliding across my windshield. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing even, praying I looked like nothing more than an unfortunate circumstance rather than deliberate concealment. The light lingered on my face. "Just another homeless person," someone said dismissively. "Check the other cars." But the man with the flashlight wasn't satisfied. He moved closer, the beam now probing the inside of my car, sliding across my pile of possessions in the passenger seat, the fast food bags on the floor. His light found the back seat. I held my breath, certain this was it. I was about to die in a grocery store parking lot for a man whose name I didn't even know. The light moved across the jumbled blankets and bags, pausing on a dark stain that might have been blood, or might have been just another stain on my threadbare belongings. "Marco," another voice called from across the lot. "Found fresh blood over here. The trail leads toward the service alley." The light snapped away from my car. "He's heading for the street. Move." Within seconds, they were gone, piling back into their SUVs and peeling out of the parking lot with the same urgency they'd arrived with. The sound of their engines faded into the distance, swallowed by the ambient noise of the city. Silence. I lay frozen for a full minute, my heart still racing, not daring to move. Finally, I sat up slowly, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. "Are they gone?" His voice came from the back seat, low and controlled despite what must be significant pain. "I think so," I whispered. "But we should wait. Make sure they don't come back." Agreed. We sat in tense silence for another 5 minutes. When no headlights reappeared, I finally allowed myself to breathe properly. "You can come out now," I said quietly. Movement behind me, the sound of blankets shifting, then a low grunt of pain that made me wince in sympathy. He extracted himself from the back seat with considerable difficulty, his movements stiff and pained. When he finally sat up, I turned to look at him properly for the first time. Even injured and bloodied, he was striking. Dark hair disheveled, falling across a forehead lined with pain, sharp cheekbones, and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, olive-toned skin that had gone pale from blood loss. And those eyes dark, intelligent, assessing me with an intensity that made me feel simultaneously exposed and strangely safe. He was older than me by maybe 10 years, mid-30s at most, the kind of masculine beauty that came with age and experience, refined and dangerous in equal measure. His suit, now that I could see it better, had definitely been expensive. Custom-tailored before it had been ruined by whatever violence had found him tonight. The fabric was torn at his side, where his hand still pressed against his ribs, blood seeping steadily between his fingers. "You're still bleeding," I observed, stating the obvious because I didn't know what else to say. "Yes." His voice carried an accent I couldn't quite place, not quite Italian, not quite something else. Cultured, educated, the voice of someone used to command. "Thank you for hiding me. I don't know why I did that," I admitted. "That was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. "Possibly, but I'm grateful nonetheless." He shifted slightly and winced, his face tightening with pain. The movement caused more blood to seep from his wound, staining my already stained blanket. "You need a hospital," I said. "No hospital." His response was immediate and firm. "No authorities of any kind. You're going to bleed to death in my car. Then I'll die owing you a debt I can never repay." His eyes met mine again, and despite his obvious pain, there was humor there. Dark humor, but humor nonetheless. "What's your name?" Maya Torres." "Maya." He said it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. "Beautiful name." He hesitated, and I watched him make a decision. Alessandro Vitali." Even in my isolated state, living in my car with minimal contact with the outside world, that name rang a bell. Vitali. I'd heard it before, whispered in news reports, mentioned in true crime podcasts I'd listened to during long, lonely nights. The Vitali family, one of the most powerful organized crime families on the East Coast. Oh God. I'd hidden a Mafia boss in my car. The realization must have shown on my face because Alessandro's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "You know the name." It wasn't a question. Yes, I think so." My voice came out barely above a whisper. You're in the Mafia?" "The Camorra," he corrected, as if the distinction mattered, though Americans tend to conflate all Italian organized crime as simply Mafia. He shifted again, grimacing. "And before you panic and throw me out of your car, understand that those men are hunting me? They're with the Volkov Bratva, Russian organized crime. They want me dead because I've been disrupting their operations in this city. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, but it should clarify that if they'd found me here, you would have died too, simply for being in the wrong place. They don't leave witnesses." His dark eyes held mine. "I, on the other hand, protect those who help me." The certainty in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it sparked something I hadn't felt in months, the sense that someone saw me. Not as invisible, not as disposable, but as a person whose actions mattered. "How bad is it?" I asked, nodding toward his side. Alessandro looked down at his injury, carefully lifting his hand away from the wound. Even in the dim light, I could see the deep gash across his ribs, still bleeding steadily. "I've had worse," he said, which I suspected was a lie. "But I'll need medical attention soon, just not from a hospital." "You have people who can help you. A doctor?" "Yes, but I need to get to a secure location first." He met my eyes again. "Can you drive?" I almost laughed. "This car barely runs. I haven't put gas in it in 2 weeks because I couldn't afford it." Something flickered in Alessandro's expression. Not pity, thank God. Not pity, but understanding. "You're living in your car." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. 3 months now, since I lost my apartment." He studied me for a long moment, taking in my unwashed hair pulled back in a messy bun, my donated clothes, the dark circles under my eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights and not enough food. I wanted to look away, to hide from his scrutiny, but something in his gaze held me captive. "Then let me make you a proposition, Maya Torres." He shifted slightly, pulling something from inside his jacket. A leather wallet, expensive and bloodstained. From it, he extracted several bills, hundreds, I realized with shock. He held them out to me. $500. More than enough to fill your tank, buy yourself some food, and provide me with safe transport to where I need to go. I stared at the money, my mouth going dry. $500. That was more than I'd had at one time in months. It could mean hot meals, a cheap motel room for a few nights, gas to drive to the next city where maybe I could find work. It could also mean diving deeper into a world I knew nothing about. A world of violence and danger, where men hunted each other through parking lots and Russian mobsters killed witnesses without hesitation. "If I take you wherever you're going," I said slowly, Will those men come after me? After this is over? Alessandro's expression darkened. Not if I have anything to say about it. Once I reach my people, I'll ensure you're protected. You have my word. The word of a criminal, I pointed out. The word of a man who honors his debts. There's a difference. He held the money out further. I won't force you, Maya. If you want me to leave now, I will. But understand that I probably won't make it more than a few blocks before I collapse from blood loss. And when the Volkovs find me, they'll torture me for information before they kill me. It won't be quick or kind. The blunt honesty of his words struck me. He wasn't trying to manipulate me with lies or false promises. He was simply laying out the reality of his situation and letting me choose. I looked at the money in his hand. $500, a lifeline. Then I looked at his face, at the steady gaze that watched me without judgment, without the disgust or dismissal I'd grown so accustomed to seeing when people looked at me these days. Where do you need to go? I asked. Relief flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. I'll direct you once we're on the road. First, we need to leave this parking lot before the Volkovs circle back. I took the money, the bills crisp and foreign in my calloused hands, and tucked them into my pocket. Then I turned forward in my seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Put your seatbelt on, I said. And try not to bleed all over everything. I just washed those blankets. His quiet laugh surprised me, a warm sound that seemed incongruous given our situation. I'll do my best. The Honda coughed and sputtered before finally turning over. The engine's rough idle, a testament to how badly the car needed maintenance I couldn't afford. But it ran. That was all that mattered right now. I pulled out of the parking lot slowly, carefully, my eyes constantly checking the mirrors for any sign of those black SUVs. The streets were mostly empty at this hour past 2 in the morning, with only the occasional drunk staggering home or homeless person, pushing a shopping cart full of their worldly possessions. Where? I asked once we'd put several blocks between us and the grocery store. Head north, toward the industrial district. Alessandro's voice came from the back seat, strained but controlled. I'll tell you when to turn. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the engine's labored breathing and the occasional hiss of pain from my passenger. In the rearview mirror, I could see him pressed against the back seat, one hand still holding his side, his face pale in the passing streetlights. How did you end up living in your car? He asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. Why do you care? Because in my experience, people who make the kind of split-second decision you made to help a bleeding stranger while men with guns are hunting him usually have a story. A reason they understand what it means to have no choice but to fight or hide or run. His words struck something deep inside me. He was right. I had made a choice tonight, but it hadn't felt like a choice. It had felt like recognition, like seeing something of myself in his desperate situation. My mother got cancer, I said finally, my voice flat with the kind of emotional distance that came from telling a story too painful to feel anymore. Stage 4. I spent everything I had trying to save her. Lost my job. Lost my apartment. Lost everything. She died anyway. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but carried. Genuine feeling. Not pity. Understanding. Yeah, me too. I turned left at his quiet instruction. What about you? How does a Mafia Kimura boss end up bleeding in the backseat of a homeless girl's car? Kimura, he corrected again, a hint of amusement in his tone. And it's a complicated story involving territorial disputes, Russian encroachment on established operations, and a betrayal I should have seen coming. Someone sold you out? Someone always sells you out eventually. It's the nature of this business. His voice carried a weary resignation. Tonight was supposed to be a neutral meeting to discuss boundaries. Instead, it was an ambush. The Volkovs want me dead so they can take over my family's operations in this city. Your family, I repeated. You mean like, your actual family? My younger brother, my cousins, my uncle who's too old to fight anymore but refuses to retire, my people, hundreds of men and women who depend on my leadership to protect them, and their families. He shifted in the back seat, and I heard him suck in a sharp breath. If I die tonight, the Volkovs will wage war on everyone connected to the Vitali name. There will be bloodshed. The weight of responsibility in his voice was palpable. This wasn't just about his own survival. It was about protecting an entire organization of people who relied on him. Must be lonely, I said quietly, being responsible for so many lives. Yes. The single word carried more emotion than 1,000 explanations could have. Turn right at the next light. I followed his instructions, navigating through increasingly deserted streets. The industrial district loomed ahead, abandoned warehouses, defunct factories, the kind of places where bodies could disappear without anyone asking questions. "Are you taking me somewhere to kill me?" I asked, only half joking. "If I wanted you dead, Maya, I wouldn't have given you $500 first." His dark humor surfaced again. "I'm taking you to a safe house. One of several locations my family maintains for situations like this." "This happens often? Getting ambushed and needing to hide?" "More often than I'd like. Less often than my enemies would prefer." He leaned forward slightly, his breath warm against the back of my neck as he pointed. "There, the warehouse with the green door. Pull around to the back entrance." I followed his directions, my heart rate picking up as we approached the building. It looked abandoned, forgotten, the kind of place the city had given up on. But when I pulled around back as instructed, I saw the subtle signs of occupation. New locks on the doors, cameras mounted in corners, fresh tire tracks in the dirt. "Now what?" I asked, putting the car in park. "Now you come inside with me." I turned to stare at him. "Excuse me?" Alessandro met my gaze steadily. "The Volkovs saw your car, Maya. If they realize I escaped their net tonight, they'll review security footage from the parking. A lot. They'll identify your license plate. They'll find you." Ice flooded my veins. "You said you'd protect me." "I am, by bringing you somewhere they can't reach you." He reached for the door handle. "I need medical attention, and you need safety. Inside this building, I can provide both. So I'm what? Your prisoner now?" "My guest," he corrected. "Free to leave whenever you wish. But if you leave before I can secure your protection, you'll be dead within 48 hours. Is that clear enough for you?" The bluntness of his words, delivered without heat or threat, made them all the more terrifying. He wasn't trying to scare me, he was simply stating a fact. I looked at the warehouse, then back at Alessandro's pale face in the rearview mirror. He was barely conscious now, held upright by sheer force of will. If I left him here and drove away, he might die before his people found him. And despite everything, the danger, the insanity of this entire situation, I found I didn't want. "That. Fine," I said, turning off the car. "But if anyone in there tries anything, I'm gone. I don't care about security footage or Russian mobsters. I'll take my chances." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough, though I think you'll find my people considerably less frightening than the alternative." I helped him out of the car, his weight nearly buckling my knees as he leaned against me. Up close, I could smell blood and expensive cologne, and something uniquely him, a scent that was already becoming familiar despite having met him less than an hour ago. We stumbled toward the back door, Alessandro's blood soaking through my donated jacket, his breath harsh against my ear as he fought to stay conscious. "There's a keypad," he managed. 5729. I punched in the numbers with shaking fingers. The door clicked open, revealing darkness beyond. "Lights are on the right," Alessandro murmured. "Switch at shoulder height." I found the switch, and fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing a space that was nothing like the abandoned warehouse exterior suggested. The interior was clean, modern, clearly maintained. Medical supplies lined shelves against one wall. Communication equipment occupied another, and in the center of the room, Mother of God, a woman's voice, sharp with alarm. "Alessandro." She appeared from a doorway I hadn't noticed, moving with swift efficiency. Tall, elegant, despite wearing practical clothes, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes the same midnight color as Alessandro's. "Bianca," Alessandro said, his voice weakening. "Called you." Didn't answer. "Because I was busy cleaning up your mess." She reached us in 3 strides, her strong hands taking Alessandro's weight from me with practiced ease. "The Volkovs hit 3 of our operations tonight. We've been in crisis mode since." She stopped, finally looking at me properly. "Who the hell is this?" "The woman who saved my life," Alessandro said, his eyes starting to drift closed. "Protect her. Maya Torres. Russian footage. Parking lot. They'll find her." And then he collapsed completely, his full weight dropping onto his sister. I assumed it was his sister, given the resemblance, who somehow managed to catch him without falling herself. "Help me get him to the medical bay," she snapped at me, not asking, commanding. Together, we dragged Alessandro through the warehouse to a room that looked like a fully equipped emergency room. The woman Bianca moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, laying Alessandro on the examination table and immediately cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. The wound was worse than I'd realized. A deep gash across his ribs that probably needed surgery, not just stitches. Blood had soaked through his clothes, pooling on the floor beneath him. "Isabella!" Bianca shouted. "I need you now." Another woman appeared, older, with gray-streaked hair and the calm competence of a medical professional. She took one look at Alessandro and started barking orders at Bianca in rapid Italian. I stood uselessly by the door, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this efficient machine of crisis management. These people knew what to do. They'd done it before. I was just... "You!" Bianca turned to me, her dark eyes sharp with suspicion. "Maya Torres," Alessandro said. "How did you find him?" "I didn't find him. He found me. Or rather, he hid in my car while Russian mobsters were hunting him." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how I looked unwashed, wearing donated clothes, smelling of 3 months living in my car. I was just trying to sleep. Then suddenly there are guns and chasing and your brother bleeding in my back seat. Bianca studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to Alessandro, who was now unconscious on the table, while Isabella worked to clean and assess his wound. "He told you to bring him here?" "Yes. And," he said. I hesitated. "He said the Russians saw my car, that they'd find me if I left." Something shifted in Bianca's expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. "He's right. If they got footage of your license plate, they'll track you down." She looked me over again, taking in details. I'm sure painted an unfortunate picture. "You're homeless." "For 3 months now," I confirmed, chin lifting despite my embarrassment. "But that doesn't mean I deserve to die because I made the mistake of helping your brother." "No," Bianca agreed. "It doesn't." She turned back to watch Isabella work on Alessandro. "It does mean, however, that you're now under the protection of the Vital family, whether you want to be or not." The finality in her tone made it clear this wasn't a request or an offer. It was simply fact. I'd opened my car door to a bleeding stranger, and in doing so, I'd stepped into a world I didn't understand. A world of organized crime and family loyalty, of violence and protection, of debts that demanded repayment and honor that transcended the law. I should have been terrified. I should have run the moment I had the chance. But as I watched this family, because that's clearly what they were, work together to save Alessandro's life with the same desperate determination I'd once felt trying to save my mother, I felt something unexpected. I felt like maybe, for the first time in months, I wasn't completely alone. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and blood, a scent that brought back visceral memories of hospital rooms and my mother's final days. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way as Isabella worked on Alessandro with swift, practiced movements. "The blade nicked his lung," Isabella said in accented English, glancing at Bianca. "Not punctured, thank God, but close. He needs antibiotics, fluids, and at least 48 hours of complete rest." "He won't rest," Bianca replied flatly. "Not with the Volkovs making their face move. Then he'll die of infection or internal bleeding. Your choice." Isabella began stitching the wound with the confidence of someone who'd done this countless times. "I'm serious, Bianca. This isn't a scratch. If he doesn't rest, if he pushes himself too hard, he could have a delayed pneumothorax. His lung could collapse." Bianca's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "I'll make sure he stays down." "Good luck with that," Isabella muttered. She glanced at me for the first time, her sharp eyes taking in my appearance. "You're the one who brought him here?" She hid me in her car. Alessandro's voice, weak but conscious, came from the table. His eyes flickered open, finding me immediately. "Saved my life while Russian bullets were looking for my skull." "Then she's braver than she looks," Isabella said, not unkindly. She finished the last stitch and began bandaging the wound. "Or crazier. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." "Both," I admitted. "Definitely both." Alessandro's lips curved into a faint smile despite the obvious pain. "An honest woman. Refreshing." Bianca moved to his side, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder in a gesture that spoke of deep affection beneath her stern exterior. "The Volkovs hit us hard tonight, Sandro. 3 shipments intercepted. 2 of our warehouses burned. They're not playing games anymore." "Neither are we." Alessandro tried to sit up, but Isabella pushed him back down with surprising force. "You're not doing anything except lying there and healing," she said firmly. I don't care if the Russians are storming the gates. You move before I say you can move, and I'll sedate you myself." "She will," Bianca confirmed. "She's done it before." Alessandro sighed, a sound of frustration and resignation. His eyes found mine again. "Maya, you're still here." "Your sister said I couldn't leave even if I wanted to," I pointed out. "Because you can't," Bianca interjected. "Not yet. Not until we've secured your identity and ensured the Volkovs can't trace you." She studied me with those same penetrating dark eyes that Alessandro had. "What's your full name? Date of birth? Last known address?" I rattled off the information, feeling strangely exposed as Bianca typed it into a tablet she'd produced from somewhere. "Why do you need all this?" "Because as of right now, you're dead," I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Not literally," Bianca clarified, "but officially. If the Volkovs are looking for you, and they will be, we need to make sure they don't find you. That means erasing your digital footprint, canceling your identification, making Maya Torres disappear from every database they might access. Is that even possible?" Alessandro's quiet laugh turned into a cough. "Maya, we're the Camorra. Making people disappear is literally in the job description. Usually more permanently," Isabella added, then seemed to realize that wasn't helpful. "But in your case, just strategically." My head spun. Hours ago, I'd been trying to sleep in my car, worried about where my next meal would come from. Now I was standing in a secret medical facility while Italian mobsters discussed erasing my identity to protect me from Russian mobsters who wanted me dead for helping their enemy. "I need to sit down," I said faintly. Bianca pointed to a chair in the corner. "Sit. Isabella will check you over once she's finished with Alessandro." "I'm fine. I'm not the one who got stabbed." "You've been living in your car for 3 months," Bianca said bluntly. "You're malnourished, probably dehydrated, and clearly exhausted. Isabella will examine you. Non-negotiable." The authoritative tone reminded me so much of Alessandro that I almost smiled. Clearly the Vitale family was accustomed to being obeyed. I sat, my legs suddenly shaky as the adrenaline that had been sustaining me began to fade. My hands trembled in my lap, and I realized I was still wearing my blood-stained jacket, Alessandro's blood, soaked through the fabric. "Here." A young man appeared in the doorway, holding out fresh clothes. He couldn't have been more than 20, with the same dark coloring as Alessandro and Bianca, but a softer face. "Bianca said you'd need these." I took the clothes, practical black pants, a soft gray sweater, and surprisingly, undergarments in what looked like my size. "Thank you. I'm Marco," he said, offering a shy smile. "Alessandro's cousin. There's a bathroom down the hall if you want a shower. It's safe here. No one knows about this location except family." The promise of a hot shower was almost unbearably tempting. I hadn't had one in over a week, relying instead on cold water and paper towels in gas station restrooms. "Go," Alessandro said from the table, his voice carrying authority even in his weakened state. "Clean up. You're safe here, Maya. I give you my word." There was something in his tone, in the way he looked at me, that made me believe him, which was probably stupid, given that he was a criminal who'd pulled me into his dangerous world without my consent. But the alternative was going back to my car, waiting for Russian mobsters to find me. So, "Fine," I said, taking the clothes from Marco. "But if anyone tries anything—" "They won't," Alessandro interrupted. "You're under my personal protection now. That means you're untouchable. Anyone who harms you answers to me, and trust me when I say no one wants that conversation." The quiet menace in his words should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of security. Marco led me down a hallway to a surprisingly well-appointed bathroom. "Take your time," he said kindly. "There are towels in the cabinet, and toiletries under the sink. Everything you might need." When he left, I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was almost unrecognizable. Hollow-eyed, gaunt-faced, with hair that badly needed washing and skin that looked gray from months of poor nutrition. And worse, sleep. When had I started looking like this? When had I stopped being Maya Torres, veterinary assistant with dreams of someday opening her own practice, and become this hollow shell? The shower was everything I dreamed of during those long, cold nights in my car. Hot water that seemed endless, actual water pressure, soap that smelled like lavender instead of the cheap stuff from dollar stores. I stood under the spray until my skin turned pink, washing away 3 months of grime and exhaustion and humiliation. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel softer than anything I'd owned in years. I found the clothes Marco had given me fit perfectly. The sweater was cashmere. I recognized the feel from my old life when I could afford nice things. The pants were tailored, expensive. Even the underwear was high quality. The kind I'd never been able to justify buying even when I had a steady income. How had they gotten my sizes so perfectly? The answer came as soon as I thought. The question. Bianca had assessed me with those sharp eyes, cataloging every detail. In a family where information was currency and observation could mean the difference between life and death, of course, she'd know exactly what size I wore just from looking at me. When I returned to the medical bay, I found Alessandro sitting up against Isabella's clear protests, arguing with Bianca in rapid Italian. They both stopped when they saw me, their expressions shifting to something I couldn't quite identify. "Better," Bianca said, nodding approvingly. "Much better. Now let Isabella examine you." "I'm really fine. Humor me," Alessandro said, his dark eyes intense on mine. "Please." The please surprised me enough that I complied, sitting on the examination table Isabella indicated while she checked my vital signs, looked in my eyes and ears, and asked questions about my health history. "Blood pressure's low," she finally pronounced. "You're dehydrated and malnourished, but nothing that can't be fixed with proper food and rest. No signs of serious illness, which is frankly miraculous given your living conditions." She gave me a stern look. "You need to eat, regularly, and sleep in an actual bed." "I'll add that to my to-do list," I said dryly. "Right after escape Russian mobsters and figure out how my life became a crime thriller." Alessandro laughed, then winced, pressing a hand to his bandaged ribs. "She has a sense of humor. I like her." "You like every woman who doesn't immediately try to kill you," Bianca said. "The bar is exceptionally low." "Not true. I'm quite selective." His eyes never left mine. "Maya risked her life for a complete stranger. That's not common. That's exceptional." Heat rose to my cheeks under his scrutiny. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Alessandro said softly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have looked away, stayed safe, protected themselves. You opened your door." The way he said it, with such quiet intensity, made it sound like I'd done something profound, rather than made a split-second decision I still wasn't sure was wise. "Speaking of which," Bianca interjected, "we need to discuss arrangements. Maya, you obviously can't return to your car or your previous locations. The Volkovs will be looking for you." "For how long?" I asked, feeling the walls closing in. "How long do I have to hide?" Alessandro and Bianca exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. "Until the threat is neutralized," Alessandro said carefully. "Which means, until the Volkovs are no longer a problem." I stared at him. "You're going to kill them. All of them." "Not all of them," he said, as if that made it better. "Just the leadership. The ones who ordered the hit on me. The ones who saw you." His expression hardened. "The ones who will never stop hunting either of us until they're dead." The casual way he discussed murder should have horrified me. Maybe it would have, in my old life. But after 3 months of surviving on the streets, of seeing how quickly society discarded people like me, of understanding that sometimes the world was simply harsh and unforgiving, I found I couldn't muster the moral outrage. "How long will that take?" I asked instead. "Days, maybe a week." Alessandro shifted on the table, and I saw him wince despite his attempts to hide it. "But until then, you stay here, with us, protected. I can't just disappear. I stopped, reality crashing over me. I didn't have anything. No job, no home, no responsibilities, no one who would miss me or even notice I was gone. The realization was devastating and liberating at once. "You have us now," Alessandro said, his voice gentle, "for however long you need. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." Over the next 3 days, I learned the strange rhythms of life in a Camorra safe house. The warehouse was far larger than I'd initially realized, with multiple rooms hidden behind false walls and secret passages. What looked like an abandoned building from the outside was actually a fully functional base of operations, complete with sleeping quarters, a kitchen that would make a chef weep with envy, and enough surveillance equipment to monitor half the city. Bianca ran operations with military precision, coordinating responses to the Volkov's attacks, while simultaneously erasing my digital footprint and gathering intelligence on the men who'd hunted Alessandro. She was formidable, brilliant, and more than a little terrifying. Marco, Alessandro's younger cousin, appointed himself my unofficial guide and protector. He showed me around the facility, explained the family structure in terms I could understand, and made sure I had everything I needed. "Don't mind Bianca," he said on the second day, as we sat in the surprisingly comfortable common room. "She seems harsh, but it's because she cares so much. She basically raised Alessandro and me after our parents died." "What happened to them?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question. "Sorry, that's too personal." "It's fine." Marco's young face grew somber. "Car bomb. 15 years ago. Bianca was only 21. Alessandro was 23. They had to take over the family operations while dealing with their grief." He looked at me seriously. "That's why they're so protective of family. They know what it's like to lose everyone." The revelation cast Alessandro and Bianca in a new light. They weren't just criminals running an organization. They were orphans who'd been forced to grow up too fast, taking on responsibilities that would crush most people. "What about you?" I asked. "Your parents?" "My father was their uncle. He died of cancer 5 years ago. My mother." He smiled sadly. "She wanted nothing to do with the family business. She moved to Florence, remarried, started fresh. I see her twice a year. But you stayed." "This is my family," Marco said simply. "Alessandro and Bianca, the cousins, the people who depend on us. I couldn't just abandon them, no matter how much my mother wanted me to choose a different path." I understood that loyalty, that sense of obligation to people who needed you. It was what had kept me working 2 jobs to pay for my mother's treatments, what had driven me into debt trying to save her. "You miss her," I observed. "Your mother. Every day." Marco's smile was bittersweet. "But some choices we make aren't about what's easy. They're about what's right, what's necessary." Alessandro was the same way. I was learning. Despite his injury, he insisted on being involved in every decision, on reviewing every piece of intelligence Bianca gathered. Isabella had threatened him with sedation twice, but he was relentless. On the 3rd night, I found him alone in the communications room, studying surveillance footage on multiple screens. He wore loose black pants and an unbuttoned shirt that showed the white bandages wrapped around his torso. He looked pale but determined, his dark eyes scanning the screens with intense focus. "You should be resting," I said from the doorway. He glanced up, a slight smile crossing his face. "So should you. It's past midnight." "I can't sleep." I moved into the room, drawn by something I couldn't name. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men with guns. I keep thinking about what would have happened if they'd found you in my car. They didn't. Alessandro gestured to the chair beside him. "Thanks to you," I sat, watching the screens that showed various locations around the city. "What are you looking for?" "Patterns. The Volkovs are moving product through the port, but they're being careful, changing routes, using different drivers." He pointed to one screen. "But everyone has habits. You just have to watch long enough to spot. And then what? Then we disrupt their operations until they're weakened enough for a direct confrontation." He glanced at me. This is boring you." "Actually, it's not." I leaned forward, studying the footage. "I used to help my mother with puzzles when she was sick. She loved those 1,000-piece ones that took weeks to complete. This is kind of the same, isn't it? Finding the pieces that fit together." Alessandro's expression softened. "Yes, exactly like that." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What was she like?" "Your mother." The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me about her in months. After she died, people had offered awkward condolences and then quickly changed the subject, uncomfortable with my grief. "She was strong," I said finally. "Even when she was sick, even at the end, she kept fighting. She used to say that Torres women were made of iron and stubbornness in equal measure." I smiled at the memory. "She worked as a nurse for 30 years. She spent her whole life taking care of other people. Like mother, like daughter," Alessandro observed. "What do you mean? You hid me in your car, Maya. You risked your life to protect someone you didn't know. That's not random chance. That's character. Something you learned from someone who taught you that some things are worth the risk." His words struck deep, bringing tears I'd been holding back for months. She would have hated what I became. Living in my car, giving up. You didn't give up. Alessandro's voice was firm. You survived. You kept going when most people would have broken. That's not weakness, Maya. That's strength. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the dangerous mafia boss to the man beneath. The man who'd lost his parents young, who'd taken on impossible responsibilities, who understood loss and survival in ways most people never would. Why are you being so kind to me? I asked quietly. Alessandro held my gaze, something intense burning in those dark eyes. Because you saved my life. Because you're brave and resourceful and stronger than you realize. He hesitated, then added softly, and because I recognize something in you, something familiar, the look of someone who's been fighting alone for too long. The vulnerability in his admission took my breath away. This powerful, dangerous man, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure, was showing me something real, something true. Alessandro. The door burst open, and Bianca rushed in, her face tight with tension. We have a problem. The Volkovs just hit the Castellano family. 3 dead, including Antonio Castellano himself. Alessandro was on his feet instantly, swaying slightly but steady. When? 20 minutes ago. They're declaring war on any family that supports us, trying to isolate us, cut off our alliances. Bianca's eyes were hard. It's working. The Castellanos are demanding we retaliate immediately, or they'll withdraw their support. Gather. Everyone, Alessandro said, his voice dropping into command mode. War room. 10 minutes. Bianca nodded and left. Alessandro turned back to me, and I saw the transformation. The man who'd been sharing vulnerabilities was gone, replaced by the leader who carried the weight of hundreds of lives on his shoulders. You should stay here, he said. This is going to get complicated. No. The word came out before I could think. I want to understand. I want to know what's happening. Alessandro studied me for a long moment. This won't be pretty, Maya. War never is. I'm not asking for pretty. I'm asking to not be kept in the dark about the situation that's keeping me prisoner. Guest, he corrected, but his lips quirked in a small smile. You're my guest. Semantics. Important ones. He moved toward the door, then paused. If you come, you'll see things, hear things, learn things about me and my family that you can't unlearn. Are you sure that's what you want? I thought about the alternative, sitting alone in my comfortable room, waiting while decisions were made about my fate without my input. I'd spent 3 months invisible, powerless, at the mercy of circumstances I couldn't control. Not anymore. I'm sure, I said. Alessandro nodded, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Then stay close to me, and if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately. Understood? Understood. The war room was exactly what it sounded like. A large space dominated by a massive table covered in maps, surveillance photos, and what looked like organizational charts. At least 20 people were already gathered when we entered, all turning to look at Alessandro with varying degrees of respect and concern. Bianca stood at the head of the table, her posture rigid with tension. Everyone's here. Alessandro moved to stand beside her, and I saw several people notice his pale face, the careful way he moved. But no one commented. They simply waited for their leader to speak. The Volkovs have declared open war, Alessandro began, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. They've hit the Castellanos. They've hit us. And they're systematically targeting any family that stands with us. He planted his hands on the table, leaning forward despite what must be significant pain. But they've made a critical mistake. They've shown their hand. They're desperate, moving fast, making noise. That gives us an opening. What kind of opening? A middle-aged man I didn't recognize asked. They've overextended, Bianca said, taking over smoothly. In the last 72 hours, they've hit 6 different targets across the city. That requires manpower, coordination, resources spread thin. She pointed to a map marked with red circles, which means their central operations are more vulnerable than usual. You want to hit them directly, someone else said, while they're distracted. Not just hit them, Alessandro corrected. Decapitate them, take out Dmitry Volkov and his top 3 lieutenants in a single strike. Without leadership, their organization will fracture. Infighting will do more damage than we ever could. Murmurs rippled through the room. This was apparently a bold strategy, even by their standards. The port facility, Bianca said, pointing to a location on the map. Intelligence suggests Dmitri is overseeing tonight's shipment personally. He'll be there with his inner circle. If we move fast, it's suicide, the middle-aged man interrupted. That facility is a fortress. They'll have 50 men minimum. We'd be walking into a kill box. Not if we're smart about it, Alessandro said. His eyes scanned the room, and I could see him calculating, strategizing. Marco, you've been tracking their security rotations. What's the pattern? Marco stepped forward, pulling up digital files on a tablet. They change guards every 6 hours. The shift change at 3 a.m. is the weakest point, about a 10-minute window where coverage overlaps but coordination is poor. 3 a.m. gives us 5 hours to prepare, Bianca said. It's tight, but doable. It's insane, another voice protested. Alessandro, you're still injured. You can barely stand without, I'm fine. The ice in Alessandro's voice silenced any further protest. We move tonight. Bianca will coordinate logistics. Marco handles communication blackout. I want the Volkovs deaf and blind when we strike. He straightened, and I saw him wince. This ends tonight, one way or another. The meeting continued for another hour. Details refined, responsibilities assigned, contingencies planned. I watched Alessandro command the room with natural authority, answering questions, resolving disputes, inspiring confidence, even while clearly in pain. This was a different side of him. Not the wounded man I'd hidden in my car, not the vulnerable person who'd shared his grief over losing his parents. This was Alessandro Vitali, head of the Camorra, a leader who men followed into battle without question. It should have frightened me. Maybe it did. A little. But I also found it compelling. The way he balanced ruthlessness with care for his people. The way he made hard decisions while considering all the angles. The way he carried the weight of so many lives without crumbling beneath it. When the meeting finally ended and people dispersed to their assignments, Alessandro approached me. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tightness around his mouth that spoke of pain he was masking. You should rest, I said. You're in no condition to. I know. He cut me off gently. But some things are more important than rest. Like getting yourself killed. Like protecting my family. All of it. His eyes held mine. Including you. I'm not your family, Alessandro. Aren't you? His hand came up to cup my cheek, the touch surprisingly gentle. You've been here 3 days, Maya. You've eaten at our table, slept under our roof, listened to our plans. In my world, that makes you family, whether you intended it or not. The heat of his palm against my skin sent unexpected warmth through my chest. I don't know anything about being part of a crime family. You know about loyalty, about sacrifice, about fighting for the people you care about. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. That's all that really matters. I should have pulled away, should have reminded myself that I was only here temporarily, that once the Volkovs were dealt with, I'd go back to my life. Except I didn't have a life to go back to. I had a broken-down car and 3 months of survival instinct that had taught me to take comfort wherever I could find it. Alessandro. Bianca's voice cut through the moment. Sandro, we need to go over the extraction routes one more time. Alessandro's hand dropped from my face, but his eyes remained on mine. Get some rest, Maya. I'll be back before the operation begins. Be careful, I said, the words, escaping before I could stop them. His smile was warm, genuine, always. But as I watched him walk away with Bianca, I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Tonight, Alessandro would lead his people into battle against an enemy that wanted him dead. And despite Isabella's warnings, despite his obvious injury, he wouldn't back down, because that's what leaders did. They put themselves in danger to protect their people. I returned to my room, but sleep was impossible. I paced the small space, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if the operation went wrong? What if Alessandro was killed? What would happen to me then? The selfish thoughts shamed me, but I couldn't silence them. I'd spent 3 months surviving alone, and I'd learned that self-preservation wasn't something to apologize for. But mixed with the selfish concern was something else, genuine worry for Alessandro. For the man who'd shown me kindness when I had nothing, who'd looked at me like I mattered. Around 2 a.m., there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Marco, dressed in black tactical gear, his young face serious. Alessandro wants to see you, he said, before we leave. I followed him through the quiet warehouse to Alessandro's private quarters, a room I hadn't seen before. It was Spartan but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and shelves lined with books in multiple languages. Alessandro stood by the window, also dressed in black, checking the magazine of a handgun with practiced efficiency. He looked up when I entered, his expression softening. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you. Instead, you're about to go into a gunfight with cracked ribs. Technically, I have bruised ribs and a stitched stab wound. The ribs are fine." His attempt at humor fell flat. I crossed the room to stand in front of him. "Why did you want to see me?" Alessandro set the gun down on the desk, his full attention on me. "Because if something goes wrong tonight, I want you to know something." "Don't." I pressed my fingers to his lips, stopping the words. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." He caught my hand, holding it against his mouth, his lips warm against my fingertips. "Listen to me, Maya. If something happens, Bianca has instructions. You'll be taken care of. Money, new identity, safe passage to wherever you want to go. You'll never have to live in your car again. You'll never have to struggle like that again." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I don't want your money, Alessandro. What do you want?" The question hung between us, loaded with meaning. What did I want? A week ago, I would have said safety, security, a hot meal and a place to sleep. But now, standing in front of this dangerous, complicated man who'd somehow become important to me in the span of 3 days, I realized I wanted something I had no right to want. "I want you to come back," I whispered. "Safe." Something blazed in Alessandro's eyes. "Maya," and then he was kissing me. His hands cupped my face, tilting my head back as his mouth claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath. I gasped against his lips, and he deepened the kiss, his tongue sliding against mine in a dance that was both commanding and tender. I melted against him, my hands fisting in his tactical vest, pulling him closer despite knowing he was injured, that this was a terrible idea, that I was falling for a man whose world I didn't understand and couldn't be part of. None of it mattered. In that moment, there was only Alessandro's mouth on mine, his hands in my hair, the heat building between us that promised both salvation and damnation. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, his dark eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. "When I get back," he said, his voice rough with desire and promise, "we're going to talk about what this is between us. And if you don't come back, I will." His certainty was absolute. "I have something to come back to now." Another knock on the door. "Sandro," Bianca's voice. "It's time." Alessandro pressed one more kiss to my lips, quick and fierce, then stepped back. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me, Bianca, or Marco. Understood?" "Understood." I watched him gather his weapons with efficient movements, the handgun, extra magazines, a knife that he strapped to his ankle. He moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, and I realized with a jolt that he probably had. At the door, he paused, looking back at me. "I'll be back before sunrise, Maya Torres. That's a promise." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in his room with the lingering taste of his kiss on my lips and a fear in my heart I couldn't name. I tried to follow his instructions. I really did. I returned to my room, locked the door, and attempted to distract myself with one of the books Marco had brought me. But the words blurred on the page, my mind unable to focus on anything except Alessandro walking into danger. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard it, a distant sound that might have been thunder, except the sky was clear. An explosion, then another. The faint pop, pop, pop of gunfire. The operation had begun. I paced my room, jumping at every sound, my imagination conjuring 1,000 scenarios of how things could go wrong. What if the intelligence was bad? What if it was a trap? What if Alessandro's injury slowed him down at a critical moment? The sounds of battle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Then, silence. Terrible, oppressive silence that was somehow worse than the noise had been. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear anything. Footsteps, voices, any sign of what was happening. Time crawled. 4 a.m., 4:30, 5. No word. No one came to tell me what had happened. By the time the first light of dawn began creeping through my window, I was nearly frantic with worry. I'd violated Alessandro's instructions and unlocked my door, prepared to go find answers even if it meant facing Bianca's wrath. But as I stepped into the hallway, I heard voices, movement in the main area. I ran, my heart in my throat, praying I wouldn't find devastation. that I wouldn't learn Alessandro had been killed, that the man who'd kissed me like I was precious had died in a warehouse gunfight while I hid safely away. I burst into the common room and stopped dead. Alessandro sat on the couch, alive. His tactical vest was gone, his shirt torn and bloodstained, but he was alive. Isabella worked on his shoulder a new injury, a graze from a bullet, while he argued with Bianca about something in rapid Italian. When he saw me, everything stopped. His eyes locked onto mine, and the relief in them mirrored what I felt. "Maya," he said, standing despite Isabella's protest. I crossed the room and threw my arms around him, not caring about his injuries, about propriety, about the dozen people who they were probably watching. He caught me, his arms wrapping around my waist, holding me tight against his chest. "You're alive," I whispered against his neck. "You came back. I told you I would." His lips pressed to my temple. I had something worth coming back to. Over his shoulder, I saw Bianca watching us with an unreadable expression. Then, slowly, she smiled. A real smile, warm and knowing. "The operation?" I asked, pulling back slightly to look at Alessandro's face. "Successful. Dmitry Volkov is dead. His lieutenants are dead. Their organization is in chaos." Alessandro's smile was fierce, victorious. "You're safe now, Maya. Truly safe. The threat is over." The words should have brought relief. Instead, they brought a different kind of fear. The threat was over, which meant I had no reason to stay, no reason to remain in this strange new world I'd stumbled into. As if reading my thoughts, Alessandro's arms tightened around me. "Don't," he said softly. "Don't think about leaving. Yet. Please." "Alessandro, I can't just stay," he interrupted, his dark eyes burning into mine. "One more week. Let me show you that this could work, that you could belong here, with me." I should have said no. Should have taken the out he'd promised, the money, the new identity, the fresh start. But as I looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability beneath the commanding exterior, felt the way he held me like I was something precious. "1 week," I agreed. His smile was brilliant, transforming his battle-worn face into something beautiful. "1 week. That's all I need to convince you." As he kissed me again, softer this time but no less intense, I realized I was already convinced. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. I'd come into Alessandro's life by accident, a homeless girl in a broken-down car. But somewhere between hiding him from his enemies and watching him lead his family with fierce loyalty, I'd fallen for him. And 1 week would only make me fall harder. 1 week turned into 2. In those 14 days, Alessandro showed me a world I'd never imagined existed. Not the violence, though I was aware it surrounded us. A constant undercurrent, but the other side of the Camorra. The family dinners where Marco's terrible jokes made everyone groan. The way Bianca's stern exterior cracked when she thought no one was watching, revealing genuine affection for her younger brother. The elderly grandmother, Nonna Lucia, who appeared one afternoon and immediately adopted me, insisting I needed fattening up and teaching me to make pasta from scratch. Alessandro was true to his word. He courted me with an intensity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Quiet dinners where we talked for hours about everything and nothing. Walks through the warehouse district at sunset, his hand warm in mine. Stolen kisses in shadowed corners that left me breathless and wanting more. He told me about his life, the weight of responsibility he'd carried since his parents died, the impossible choices he'd had to make, the people he'd lost along the way. And I told him about mine, the mother I'd loved and lost, the dreams I'd abandoned, the months of invisibility that had nearly broken me. "You're not invisible to me," he said one night as we sat on the warehouse roof, looking out over the city lights. "You're the most visible person in my world, Maya. Sometimes I think you're the only real thing in it." I'd kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't say into the contact. Because I was falling in love with Alessandro Vitali, and that terrified me more than any Russian mobster ever could. The money he'd promised appeared in a bank account under my new identity, Maya Sullivan, complete with birth certificate, social security number, and a credit history that suggested a responsible, if unremarkable, financial life. $20,000. More money than I'd ever had at one time. "It's yours," Alessandro said when I protested. "Whether you stay or go, your choice." But staying felt less like a choice and more like an inevitability with each passing day. On day 15, everything changed. I was in the kitchen with Nonna Lucia, learning to make her famous ragu sauce, when Bianca burst in, her face tight with the kind of tension that meant trouble. "Where's Alessandro?" she demanded. In his office, I replied, alarmed by her tone. What's wrong? Everything. She was already moving, pulling out her phone. Marco, get everyone to the war room. Now. I followed her, my heart sinking. Nana Lucia caught my arm as I passed. Whatever happens, Piccola, remember family protects family. Always. The war room was chaos when I entered. Alessandro stood at the head of the table, his face carved from granite as he stared at a laptop screen. Marco was frantically typing on another computer. Bianca was on 2 phones at once, speaking rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. Maya. Alessandro looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. You need to leave the room. What's happening? Now, Maya, please. But I'd learned to read him over these 2 weeks. This wasn't danger. This was catastrophe. No. I moved to stand beside him, looking at the screen. It showed surveillance footage from what looked like a residential street. Date stamped 2 hours ago. Tell me. Alessandro's jaw worked, but finally he stepped aside, letting me see clearly. The footage showed a house modest, suburban, with a well-kept garden. I watched as men in dark clothing approached, breaking down the door, dragging out a middle-aged woman, screaming, then the house exploding in a ball of fire that consumed everything. Who was she? I whispered. Maria Castellano, Bianca said, her voice hollow. Antonio's widow. The Volkovs are supposed to be fractured, leaderless, but someone is coordinating revenge attacks. Someone we didn't account for. Dimitri's brother, Alessandro said, his voice deadly quiet. Victor. He was supposed to be in Moscow. Our intelligence said he wouldn't come back for months. He came back. Marco looked up from his computer, his young face pale. And he brought reinforcements. Russian bratva from 3 different cities. He's not just coming after us, Alessandro. He's coming after everyone connected to us. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My car. The security footage from the parking lot. We scrubbed it, Bianca said quickly. Your identity is secure. But they saw my face. My voice rose with panic. Those men who were hunting Alessandro, they saw me through the windshield. If this Victor is thorough, if he's interviewing his people about that night, Maya. Alessandro's hands gripped my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. Listen to me. You're safe here. They don't know who you are. They don't know where you are. But if they find out, they won't. You can't promise that. The fear I'd been suppressing for 2 weeks bubbled. Over. Alessandro, you told me the threat was over. You said I was safe. But it's not over, is it? It's never over. This is what your life is: constant danger, constant violence, always looking over your shoulder. The room had gone silent. Everyone was watching us, but I couldn't stop. I've watched you heal from one injury just to plan the next battle. I've seen you make decisions about who lives and dies like you're ordering dinner. I've tried to understand, tried to accept this world, but my voice broke. I can't do this, Alessandro. I can't love someone who might die in a warehouse gunfight any night. I can't live like this. The word love hung in the air between us, my accidental confession more damning than any judgment. Alessandro's face had gone carefully blank, the mask he wore when dealing with business sliding into place. Then leave. I stared at him. What? You have money, a new identity, safe passage to anywhere you want to go. His voice was cold, controlled. I won't keep you here against your will, Maya. I never would. If you want to leave, leave. Sandro Bianca started, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. Everyone out. I need to speak with Maya alone. The room emptied quickly, leaving us facing each other across the table covered in maps and surveillance photos. Evidence of a life I'd never truly be part of. I'm sorry, I said, tears burning my eyes. I didn't mean yes, you did. Alessandro's eyes were dark, unreadable. And you're right. This is my life. Violence, danger, constant vigilance. I was a fool to think you could accept it, that you could accept me. That's not fair. I'm trying isn't enough. His control cracked, anger flooding through. Do you think I don't know what I am? What I ask of the people around me? Every person in this building has chosen this life, Maya. Chosen to stand with me despite the cost. But you? He laughed bitterly. You stumbled into it by accident, and I've been trying to convince you to stay ever since. Selfish. That's what I've been. You're not selfish. I am. He moved around the table toward me. I'm selfish because from the moment you opened that car door, I wanted you. I saw your strength, your compassion, your courage, And I wanted it for myself. I wanted you to choose this world, choose me, because having you here made everything bearable. His hands framed my face, and I saw the raw emotion in his eyes that he usually kept hidden. But you're right to be afraid, he continued, his voice dropping. You're right to question whether you can live like this. Because I can't promise you safety, Maya. I can't promise that some enemy won't find a way to hurt me by hurting you. All I can promise is that I will fight like hell to protect you, that I will use every resource I have, every connection, every weapon at my disposal to keep you safe. That's not enough, I whispered, even as my heart broke saying it. It can't be enough. No. He pressed his forehead to mine, and I felt him shaking. It can't be. We stood there for a long moment, holding each other, both of us crying for what we couldn't have, for the impossible love that had bloomed in the worst circumstances. Finally, Alessandro stepped back. I'll have Marco arrange transport. Wherever you want to go, different city, different state, even different country will make it happen. You'll have resources, protection until you're established somewhere new, Alessandro, and I'll never contact you again. His voice was firm, final. Clean break, so you can build the life you deserve. The safe, normal life you should have had before your mother got sick, and the world took everything from you. I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't want safe if it meant losing him, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. His world was violence and danger and impossible choices, and I'd spent 3 months, barely surviving the aftermath of my last impossible choice. How many more could I endure? I need time, I said finally. To think. Alessandro nodded. Take all the time you need. But Maya? His eyes held mine. Whatever you decide, know this meeting you, having you in my life these past 2 weeks. It's been the best thing that's happened to me in years, maybe ever. So thank you, for opening that car door, for taking a chance on a bleeding stranger, for showing me what it's like to be seen as a man rather than just a boss. He turned and walked out before I could respond, leaving me alone in the war room with maps that showed a city at war and my heart breaking into pieces. I spent the next 6 hours in my room, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the impossible choice before me. Stay with Alessandro and accept a life of danger and uncertainty. Leave and be safe but alone, always wondering what might have been. Neither option felt right. Both felt like loss. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it, to find Bianca, holding 2 glasses of wine. You drink? She asked. Not usually. Tonight seems like a good night to start. She entered without waiting for invitation, handing me a glass and settling into the chair by my window. He told me what happened, what you said. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause problems. You didn't cause anything, Maya. Bianca sipped her wine, studying me over the rim. You just spoke the truth. This life isn't for everyone. Hell, it's barely for most of us who were born into it. How do you do it? I asked, sinking onto the bed. Live with the constant threat? Never knowing if today is the day everything goes wrong? Bianca was quiet for a long moment. I lost my parents when I was 21. Car bomb meant for my father. My mother was just collateral damage, wrong place, wrong time. Her voice was steady, but I heard the old pain underneath. Alessandro and I had to take over the family operations while we were still grieving. We were babies. Really. I'd been studying art history at university. He'd been working on a graduate degree in international business. We had plans, dreams, futures that didn't involve this. She looked at me, her dark eyes holding mine. But our family needed us. The people who depended on my father for their livelihoods, for their safety, they needed leadership. So we put aside our dreams and we stepped up. And yes, it's been dangerous. Yes, I've had to make choices that haunt me. Yes, every day I wonder if this is the day I lose Alessandro the way I lost my parents. So, why do you stay? I asked. Because family isn't about blood, Maya. It's about choice. Every day, I choose these people. I choose Alessandro. I choose Marco and Nonna Lucia, and every single person in this organization who trusts us to protect them. And they choose us back. She set down her wine glass. That's what you're really afraid of, isn't it? Not the danger, the commitment. Her words struck home with devastating accuracy. After my mother died, I said slowly, I had nothing. No one. I learned that depending on people, caring about people, only leads to loss. So I stopped. I became invisible. I survived alone because alone was safer. But lonely, Bianca observed, desperately. The admission hurt. And then Alessandro crashes into my life, bleeding and desperate, and suddenly I'm not alone anymore. I'm part of something. I matter to people. And that's terrifying, Bianca finished. Because if you let yourself care, let yourself belong, you can lose it all again. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Bianca stood, crossing to sit beside me on the bed. She took my hand, her grip firm and warm. Here's what I know, Maya. You opened that car door for my brother when you had every reason not to. You hid him from men with guns. You've spent 2 weeks getting to know us, learning our rhythms, becoming part of this family. Those aren't the actions of someone who wants to be alone. Those are the actions of someone brave enough to choose connection despite the risk. What if I'm not brave enough? You are. Bianca's certainty was absolute. You survived 3 months homeless in a city that chews people up and spits them out. You watched your mother die and kept going. You risked your life for a stranger. If that's not brave, I don't know what is. She squeezed my hand. But you have to decide what kind of brave you want to be now. The brave that chooses safety and solitude? Or the brave that chooses love and family, even knowing the cost? Before I could respond, Marco burst through the door, his face pale with urgency. Bianca, we have a problem. Security picked up multiple vehicles approaching the perimeter. The Volkovs, they've found us. The wine glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. The warehouse erupted into controlled chaos. Alessandro appeared in my doorway seconds after Marco's announcement, his face set in hard lines of determination. Get Maya to the safe room, he ordered Bianca. Full lockdown protocol. No, I stood, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. No, I'm not hiding this time. Alessandro's eyes flashed. Maya, this isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not. I moved toward him, my decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. I'm not hiding while you fight. I'm not waiting in safety while the people I care about face danger. If the Volkovs found this place, they found it because of me. Because I was in your car that night. So I'm not hiding from the consequences. Maya, how many vehicles? I asked Marco, cutting Alessandro off. 6 SUVs. Approximately 40 armed men. Marco looked between me and Alessandro, uncertain. And how many of us? 23 in the facility, Bianca said, appearing in the doorway. Plus, the safe house has defensive advantages they don't know about. Then we have a chance. I looked at Alessandro. Tell me how I can help. For a moment I thought he'd refuse. That he'd have me dragged to the safe room regardless of my protests. But then something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. Can you shoot? He asked. My mother took me to the range when I was 16. She believed women should know how to protect themselves. The memory was bittersweet. I'm not a marksman, but I can hit a target. Alessandro nodded once, making his decision. Bianca, get her fitted with a vest and sidearm. Maya, you stay with me. You don't leave my sight. Understood? Understood. What followed was a blur of preparation. Bianca appeared with body armor that fit surprisingly well, a handgun with extra magazines, and rapid-fire instructions on the warehouse's defensive positions. The exterior looks abandoned, but we have reinforced walls, ballistic glass, and kill zones at every entrance, she explained as she worked. The Volkovs will expect resistance, but they won't expect the level of fortification we actually have. Why haven't we evacuated? I asked. Because running would just postpone the inevitable. Alessandro appeared, also now in tactical gear, his healed injuries apparently not slowing him down. Victor wants war, he'll get it. But on our terms, in a location we control. He checked my weapon with professional efficiency, made sure my vest was properly secured, then took my face in his hands. I'm going to say something now, and I need you to hear it, he said, his dark eyes burning into mine. I love you, Maya Torres. I've loved you since you hid me in your car without knowing who I was or what I could do for you. I love your courage and your compassion and the way you fit into my family like you've always belonged here. My breath caught. Alessandro. No, let me finish. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. If we survive tonight, I'm going to ask you to marry me, to be my wife, my partner, to stand beside me as I lead this family. Not because you're obligated, not because you're trapped, but because you choose it. Choose us. Choose me. Tears streamed down my face. And if I say no, then I'll let you go. His smile was sad, beautiful. I'll keep my promise. Clean break, fresh start, the life you deserve. But I'll love you for the rest of my days, Maya. That doesn't change regardless of your answer. You're doing this now? I demanded, laughing through tears. While Russian mobsters are literally breaking down the doors? Terrible timing, he agreed. But I've learned that tomorrow isn't guaranteed in my world. So, I tell you now, while I still can. I love you, Maya Sullivan Torres, and I would be honored if you'd consider staying. Before I could respond, the first explosion rocked the building. They're breaching the north entrance. Marco's voice crackled over the radio. Multiple hostiles, heavy weapons. Alessandro pressed one fierce kiss to my lips. Stay close to me, trust my family, and for God's sake, don't do anything heroic. That's rich coming from you, I shot back. His laugh was brief but genuine. I knew I loved you for a reason. Then we were moving, taking positions according to a plan that had been drilled into everyone except me. Alessandro positioned me behind reinforced barriers with clear sightlines to the main entrance. Bianca on one side and Marco on the other. They'll try to overwhelm us with numbers, Bianca explained, her voice calm despite the circumstances. But the entry points force them into narrow channels. Aim center mass, conserve ammunition, and breathe panic will kill you faster than bullets. The warehouse lights went out, plunging us into darkness. Then emergency lighting kicked in red, dim, creating deep shadows perfect for defensive positions. Here they come, Alessandro's voice, steady and commanding over the radio. Hold positions, fire on my mark. I heard them before I saw them, boots on concrete, shouted orders in Russian, the metallic click of weapons being readied. My heart hammered so hard I could barely hear anything else. Then they poured through the breached entrance like a wave, and Alessandro's voice cut through the chaos. Now! The world exploded into violence. I'd never been in a gunfight before. Nothing could have prepared me for the deafening noise, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the way time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. I fired when targets presented themselves, my mother's training coming back in muscle memory I'd forgotten I had. Beside me, Bianca moved with lethal grace, each shot precise and controlled. Marco was equally professional despite his youth. And Alessandro was a force of nature, commanding his people while simultaneously fighting with a skill that spoke of years of experience. Left flank, someone shouted. More attackers, trying to flank our position. I've got it, Alessandro responded, already moving. Maya, stay in position. But I saw what he didn't, another group of attackers breaking through a weakened wall, section behind him. If they made it through, Alessandro would be caught in a crossfire. I didn't think. I just moved. Maya, no. Bianca's voice followed me as I broke from cover, running toward the breach. I fired at the attackers, forcing them back, buying precious seconds. Alessandro turned, saw what was happening, his face a mask of fury and fear. Get back. But it was too late. I'd made myself a target, and the Volkov's attention shifted to me. I dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off metal around me. My vest took 2 hits that knocked the wind from my lungs but held. I returned fire, but my magazine was running empty. Then Alessandro was there, appearing beside me with the speed of desperation. He laid down covering fire while I reloaded with shaking hands. What the hell were you thinking? He shouted over the gunfire. That I love you too, I shouted back. And I'm not losing you the way I lost my mother by standing aside and watching it happen. His eyes widened. Then he was kissing me, hard and fast, before returning his attention to the battle. We're getting married, he said, firing with deadly precision. Assuming we survive this. Deal. The firefight lasted another 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. The Volkov's numerical advantage was negated by the warehouse's defensive design and the skill of Alessandro's people. Gradually, the attackers fell back, their assault losing momentum as casualties mounted. They're retreating, Bianca reported over the radio. North exit clear. East exit clear. Don't pursue, Alessandro ordered. Hold positions. Could be a tactical retreat. We waited in tense silence, weapons trained on the entrances, waiting for a renewed assault that never came. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alessandro gave the all-clear. Casualty report. He ordered, his voice tight. 3 wounded, none critical, Marco responded. Building damage substantial but manageable. Enemy casualties. He paused. At least 15 down. The rest retreated. Alessandro's hand found mine in the darkness, his grip almost painful in its intensity. You scared the hell out of me, he said softly. running out like that. You would have done the same for me. That's different. No, I said firmly. It's not. That's what you've been trying to tell me, isn't it? This life, your world, it's about choosing to stand together, to fight for each other, to accept that danger exists but refusing to let it make you stop living. Alessandro pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. So you're staying? You're choosing this? Us? I'm choosing you, I corrected. The world comes with the package, and I'll learn to navigate it. But I'm choosing you, Alessandro Vitali. Your courage, your loyalty, your ridiculous tendency to get yourself shot, protecting people you care about. Look who's talking, he murmured, his lips brushing mine. You just charged into a gunfight to protect me. I learned from the best. We were interrupted by Bianca clearing her throat loudly. As heartwarming as this is, we have wounded to treat and security to reinforce before Victor sends reinforcements. Alessandro straightened, immediately back in command mode. But his hand remained in mine, an anchor in the chaos. The rest of the night passed in a blur of medical attention, damage assessment, and strategic planning. The wounded were treated none seriously, thank God. The building's defenses were reinforced at the breach points, and Alessandro coordinated with his allies, calling in favors and making arrangements to end the Volkov threat once and for all. Victor made a mistake attacking us here, he explained as we gathered in the war room at dawn. He revealed his remaining forces, his tactics, his desperation. Now we know where he is, how many men he has left, and that he's willing to take massive risks. So we end it, Bianca said. Today. Alessandro nodded. Today. The operation against Viktor Volkov was planned with the same meticulous detail as every other Vitali strategy I'd witnessed. But this time, I wasn't hiding in a safe room. I was part of the planning, offering perspectives from my outsider's view that sometimes caught details the family missed. You have a good tactical mind, Bianca observed at one point. Unconventional but effective. I watched a lot of crime documentaries when I was living in my car, I said with a shrug. Turns out some of it was useful. The assault on Victor's stronghold happened that afternoon. I stayed at the warehouse this time not hiding, but coordinating communications with Marco, managing information flow, and ensuring everyone had real-time intelligence. Watching Alessandro walk out that door, knowing he was walking into danger again, nearly broke me. But he'd given me a role, trusted me to be part of his team, and I wouldn't let him down. He'll come back, Nonna Lucia said, appearing beside me with espresso and biscotti. That boy has too much stubbornness to die before marrying you properly. I laughed despite my anxiety. We're not engaged. Not officially. Please. The old woman waved dismissively. I see how he looks at you. How you look at him. You're engaged. We just need to make it official with proper rings and a proper ceremony. She winked. I'm already planning the menu. The operation took 3 hours. 3 hours of monitoring radio chatter, tracking movements on surveillance feeds, and praying to a god I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Then Alessandro's voice over the radio. Victor is down. Threat neutralized. Coming home. I sagged with relief, Marco catching me before I fell. He's fine, Marco said, grinning. Told you, Vitalis don't die easily. When Alessandro walked through the door 2 hours later, exhausted but alive and whole, I threw myself into his arms with enough force to make him stagger. It's over, he murmured into my hair. Really over this time. Victor's dead. His organization is scattered. The other families have agreed to a peace summit. You're safe, Maya. We're all safe. I pulled back to look at him. Now what? His smile was slow, warm, filled with promise. Now I ask you properly. He dropped to one knee right there in the war room, in front of Bianca and Marco and half a dozen other family members who'd gathered to welcome him home. Maya Torres Sullivan, you crashed into my life when I was at my lowest. You saved me when you had every reason not to. You challenged me, stood up to me, fit into my family like you'd always belonged. You ran into a gunfight to protect me, and you chose this life knowing full well how hard it would be. He produced a ring, not the one he'd taken from his mother's collection, but something different. Simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light. I love you with everything I am. Will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner, help me build something better than what came before? I looked around the room at the faces watching us. Bianca, fierce and protective. Marco, young and hopeful. Nonna Lucia, already crying happy tears. These people who'd accepted me, protected me, made me family. This world wouldn't be easy. There would always be danger, always challenges. But I'd spent 3 months learning that safety was an illusion anyway. At least with Alessandro, with this family, I wouldn't face those challenges alone. Yes, I said, dropping to my knees to be level with him. Yes, I'll marry you, Alessandro Vitali, and I'll love you, and fight beside you, and probably drive you crazy arguing about your more reckless decisions. I wouldn't have it any other way. He slipped the ring on my finger, then kissed me, as the room erupted in cheers. When we finally broke apart, Bianca was smiling wider than I'd ever seen. "Welcome to the family, Maya," she said, officially this time. "Thank you." I looked at Alessandro, at this man who'd somehow become my everything, for accepting me, for trusting me. "Always," Alessandro promised, "from now until forever." 6 months later. The wedding was smaller than traditional Camorra ceremonies, but no less significant. We married in a private chapel, surrounded by family and the people who mattered most. I wore a dress Bianca helped me choose. Elegant, simple, nothing like the elaborate gowns in magazines, but perfect for me. Alessandro looked devastating in his tuxedo, his eyes bright with joy as I walked down the aisle. No father to give me away. I walked alone, the way I'd been surviving when he found me. But this time, I wasn't walking toward loneliness. I was walking toward family, toward belonging, toward love. "I love you," he whispered as I reached him. "I love you too," I whispered back. My dangerous, complicated, perfect man. The reception was held at Alessandro's private estate, a place I now called home. The mansion was warm and lived in, filled with the controlled chaos of a large Italian family. My veterinary skills had found unexpected use treating the family's various pets, and Alessandro had surprised me by funding the opening of a small animal clinic in an underserved neighborhood. "You wanted to help," he'd said when I'd protested the expense. "This way you can. No strings, no obligations. Just you, being the healer you've always been." As I danced with my husband, at our reception, I thought about the woman I'd been with 6 months ago. Homeless, invisible, convinced that caring about people only led to loss. "What are you thinking?" Alessandro asked, holding me close. "I'm glad my car was unlocked that night," I admitted. "That I'm glad you stumbled into my life, bleeding and desperate." "Best terrible decision I ever made," he agreed, kissing my temple. "Though technically, you made the terrible decision. I just benefited from it. We both benefited." "True." He spun me gently, and I caught sight of Bianca dancing with Marco, Nonna Lucia holding a court at a table surrounded by elderly relatives, the family I'd gained. "Thank you, Maya, for taking a chance, for choosing us. Thank you for showing me what it means to truly belong somewhere, to someone." As the music swelled and Alessandro held me close, I realized that sometimes the most terrifying choices lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. I'd opened my car door to a bleeding stranger and found a family. I'd chosen danger over safety and found love deeper than I'd imagined possible. The life I lived now wasn't what I'd planned. It wasn't safe or predictable or normal by any definition. But it was mine, ours, built on choice and courage and the kind of love that's forged in fire and comes out stronger. I was Maya Vitali now, wife of a Camorra boss, protected and protector. No longer invisible, no longer alone, no longer hiding from a world that had once seemed too harsh to face. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.